Please welcome our last speaker of the evening, Syed.
This is my dad, and when I was a wee little lad, I used to sneak into his closet and mess around with my favorite thing. It was a Sony film camera, and I was just so intrigued by what this marvelous piece of engineering. And that began my passion for photography. And so as it grew, as my passion grew, I started to realize what was it about photography that I loved. And it was not about the pictures, it wasn't about the camera, and it wasn't about clicking a button. It was about making a connection with the people and the nature and the wildlife that I was seeing through my viewfinder. See, when I hold a camera, the most important thing for me is what I'm seeing through that viewfinder. Everything else is minute. My entire being is dedicated to figuring out the best way to capture what I'm seeing and then share it. So really what that does is it helps you to understand what photography does as a tool to build connection. And that's what I use it for. I use it to build a connection to my subject and figure out what their story is and why their story is important. And then I want to tell it to people so that they have a chance to connect to it and draw their own conclusions, but also understand where someone else's narrative is coming from. So where does being curious fit into all of this? To be curious, you have to, it takes a lot of courage, but to be nosy and curious, I think it emboldens you. It builds your character. It takes you to places that you typically don't want to go to. It pushes you out of your comfort zone. And I think it takes you to a place where you are able to learn new ideas and share those ideas with people. And not just people. I approach nature and wildlife the same way because I think that is just as important. But to be nosy, you have to be able to take risks. There's quite a few times where I found myself in situations where I shouldn't be in, or in places where I don't belong. But that has not stopped me from venturing into new ideas or new spots. Once you start doing that, you start to learn that you have this ability to capture creative stories and then tell those stories to people. But you have to figure out a way to become that person or that subject's champion. And with that, it's really about immersing yourself in their shoes and understanding what they're going through and why they're talking to you about what they're talking to you about, and then share that with the world. What it does is when you make that connection with that person, it lets you build a narrative from their point of view rather than your own. And I think that gets lost somewhere in translation with a lot of the agenda-driven ideas that we see today. I think people forget to step into someone else's shoes and really understand where they're coming from. What that does is puts you in situations where you're going to be uncomfortable. And I've been in plenty of situations where I've felt a little uncomfortable. It's against my beliefs or something, but you have to put that aside. And you have to understand that this person is passionate about something, and they're wanting to share that story with you. And you have to become their champion to tell it in its truest form. And it's going to take you to different places, whether it's in the middle of a hate rally or the irony of a bunch of Muslims praying in a baggage claim at the airport. But that's what it's about. That's what photography for me is. So I'm going to leave you guys with one thing. I had a lot of stuff, and as you can see, I didn't use any of this. Be curious. Step into places and do things that make you uncomfortable, because that's the only way you're going to learn to question things. And when you question things, you start to build a narrative of your own with all that knowledge. And that will help you do epic shit. I guarantee it.